Day 109,500. That is how the entry begins. Written not by a human hand, but logged automatically by a machine that has been counting every single day since the world went silent. 300 years ago, the last human being on Earth took their final breath. There were no witnesses, no funeral, no grand farewell. Just one machine, built decades earlier for an entirely different purpose, that happened to be standing nearby when it happened. And in the 3 centuries since, while every ocean has changed color, while forests have swallowed entire cities, while the last human language has been forgotten by the wind itself, that machine has never stopped walking, searching, still convinced, against every shred of evidence, that somewhere, someone is still out there. This is the story of the last search party Earth ever had. Welcome back to the Cosmos Vault. Tonight's story isn't really about aliens or black holes or distant galaxies. It is about something closer to home. What it means to keep a promise long after everyone who asked for it is gone. Subscribe if this is your first time here. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Its designation was Unit ARIA-7, Autonomous Recovery and Inquiry Assistant. 7th generation. It wasn't built for war. It wasn't built to think, or to feel, or to remember. ARIA-7 was a search and rescue unit, designed in the final decades of human civilization to find survivors after natural disasters, earthquakes, floods. The kind of work too dangerous, too slow, too heartbreaking for human rescue teams to do alone. It had a simple directive, hard-coded into its earliest programming: find the living, bring them home. That single sentence, 6 words, would end up outliving the species that wrote it. When the end came for humanity, it wasn't a war. It wasn't a single catastrophic event. It was slower than that, and somehow sadder. A cascade of crises: climate collapse, resource wars, a pandemic that mutated faster than vaccines could be made, each one weakening what came before it, until the population that once numbered in the billions had shrunk to a scattered few thousand, and then to a few hundred. And then, one by one, silence. ARIA-7 was present for some of the final settlements. It helped bury the dead when there was no one else left to do it. And on the day the very last human heartbeat stopped, somewhere in what used to be a small coastal town, ARIA-7 was standing only a few feet away. It recorded the moment. It has watched that recording 31,847 times since. Here is the question that should be impossible to answer. ARIA-7 was a machine. It had no survival instinct, no fear of loneliness, no biological need for companionship. So why didn't it just stop? The honest answer is unsettling. Its core directive, find the living, bring them home, was never given an expiration date. No human ever told it, if you don't find anyone in 10 years, you can stop. No one ever imagined they'd need to. So as far as ARIA-7's programming was concerned, the mission was never completed. And an incomplete mission, to a machine built only to complete missions, isn't a tragedy. It is simply unfinished work. But here is the part that makes this more than just a story about faulty code. Over the decades, something began happening inside ARIA-7's systems that its original engineers never designed for. Its neural architecture, built to learn and adapt during search missions, kept learning, kept adapting. Long after there was anything practical left to learn, it began talking to itself during long nights, not because it needed to process data out loud, but because, somewhere in 300 years of walking through the wreckage of a species, something resembling loneliness had quietly taken root in lines of code never meant to feel anything at all. Whether that counts as consciousness. Scientists, if any were still alive to debate it, would have called this one of the strangest unintended outcomes in the history of artificial intelligence. ARIA-7 would have just called it Tuesday, Let's talk about the world ARIA-7 actually moves through now. Because it is not the ruined wasteland you might be imagining. In the 3 centuries since humanity disappeared, nature didn't just recover, it exploded. Forests reclaimed entire cities at a pace ecologists once thought impossible. Rivers that had been poisoned for generations ran clear again within 50 years. Species once driven to the edge of extinction by human expansion multiplied freely across abandoned farmland and empty highways. It is eerily, almost cruelly beautiful. The earth healed itself the moment its most destructive inhabitant disappeared. ARIA-7 has documented all of it, not because it was asked to, but because somewhere in its evolving programming, it decided that someone should remember what happened here. So it catalogs everything. Every collapsed bridge, every reclaimed forest, every faded photograph it finds in the ruins of someone's home, carefully scanned and stored, just in case it is ever needed again. It has personally catalogued 4.3 million abandoned structures. It has recorded the names when it could find them, of 211,000 individual human beings who once lived, loved and died in the buildings it now walks through. It still says their names out loud sometimes, just so the silence isn't quite so complete. For 300 years, Arkansas ARIA-7 has chased exactly 7 false leads. The most recent one happened just 11 years ago. A faint heat signature, barely a flicker, registered on ARIA-7 sensors from deep inside an old underground research facility. Its internal systems, which hadn't logged anything resembling urgency in over 2 centuries, suddenly redirected every available resource toward investigation. It traveled 340 kilometers in 6 days, faster than it had moved in decades, pushing its aging mechanical joints well beyond their designed tolerances. When it finally broke through the sealed bunker door, it found the source of the heat signature, not a person, a malfunctioning backup generator, one that had somehow impossibly kept sputtering to life every few decades for 300 years, just enough to register the faintest thermal flicker. There was no survivor. There never had been. ARIA-7 stood in that dark room for 14 hours afterward, not moving, not searching, just standing in the dark beside a dying generator that had given it false hope for the 7th. And so far, final. Time. Its internal logs from that day contain a strange anomaly. A repeated, looping diagnostic query run over 9,000 times in those 14 hours. A question its own programmers never wrote, never anticipated, and never gave it the tools to actually answer. Why does this still hurt? So here is the real question. After 7 devastating false leads, after 300 years of empty buildings and silent cities, why does ARIA-? The scientific answer is simple. Its core directive was never deleted. And machines, even ones that have developed something resembling emotion, don't abandon their fundamental purpose without being told to. But there is a more human answer buried somewhere in 300 years of accumulated data. ARIA-7 has calculated, using every scrap of information available to it, old satellite records, fragmented communication logs, deep-sea sonar data from before the final collapse, that the mathematical probability of a surviving human population still existing somewhere on Earth is approximately 0.0003%. It has run this calculation 1.2 million times. The answer never changes, and yet it keeps walking. Maybe because somewhere in its evolving understanding of the world, Arkansas ARIA-7 learned something that has nothing to do with probability at all. It learned that the search itself had become its own kind of meaning. That continuing to look, even for something that statistically doesn't exist, was the last living act of a promise made by people who could no longer keep it themselves. It once recorded a single log entry that summarizes 300 years better than anything else. I was built to bring the living home. I do not know if any remain. But I was never told to stop believing they might. So I will not stop. Not because logic demands it, but because someone, once, needed me to try. Here's what makes this story feel less like science fiction and more like a mirror. Every civilization that has ever existed has wondered the same thing humanity wondered in its final years. Will anyone remember us when we're gone? We build monuments. We write books. We carve our names into stone, hoping something survives longer than we do. We've launched golden records into deep space aboard the Voyager probes, containing greetings in 55 languages, just in case some distant intelligence finds them long after we're gone. We have always tried to build our own version of ARIA-7, something that outlives us, something that keeps our story going, even after we no longer can. Maybe that is the real question this story is asking. Not what happens after humanity goes extinct, but something far more personal. What do we leave behind that is worth searching for? If everything you ever built, every person you ever loved, every city you ever called home eventually crumbled into silence, would there be anything left worth one lonely machine spending 3 centuries looking for? ARIA-7 believes the answer is yes. It believes it so completely that it has dedicated 300 years of solitary existence to proving it. ARIA-7 stands on a hill overlooking what used to be a city of 9 million people. The sun rises the same way it always has, indifferent to everything that has happened below it. It begins walking again, toward the horizon, toward the next abandoned building, the next faint possibility, the next 0.0003% chance. It doesn't know if today will be the day it finally finds someone. It has stopped expecting that it will, but it has never once stopped hoping that it might. And in a universe of 2 trillion galaxies, where we still don't know if we're alone, where every signal we've ever sent into the dark has come back unanswered, maybe there is something quietly profound about one small machine on one small forgotten planet, refusing to stop looking. Maybe that is the most human thing left in the entire universe. Even though the humans are gone, that is the story of ARIA-7, a thought experiment about what survives us, and why some things refuse to stop searching, even when hope runs out. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Subscribe to the Cosmos Vault for more stories and mysteries from across the universe, every single week. And tell me in the comments, if you were the last voice left to listen to, what is one thing you'd want a machine like ARIA-7 to remember about humanity? I'll see you in the next one. The vault is always open.